Good morning, students. So, this is Miss Mariam, and I hope that you have listened to my first video. It was just a trial run in which I was experimenting with all those different things. Like, I had the screen recording with me, and along with that, I had only the Google Drive. So, I tried to capture the video Google Drive, and it is a little bit messy in which you will see my entire screen, but now I have downloaded the proper Microsoft PowerPoint presentations, and I am trying to capture the video of the same. I hope the video is clear to you, the sound is clear to you, and now I will be starting with my lecture in a proper manner. So I'll be starting, as I said earlier, I will be directly moving into the text Orientalism as such. So I'll be starting with colonialism, and in the last video we talked about the etymology of colonialism, in which I talked about the term colonial and how it meant a movement of a group of people to a new locality, and even though they retained their relationship with their parent state. And we also looked into the various aspects of that single definition, in which we understood that it lacks reference to the original settlers of the land, and it completely evacuates the word of any implication of encounter which happened behind that, like conquest and domination. So I was trying to tell you the point that behind all these colonial processes, there's something like unfair process must have been part of this colonialism. And we ended the lecture by trying to say that colonialism is not an identical process everywhere. It is different in different areas, and it is more complex and traumatic than you think. We finished that video with this example of Tempest, in which I tried to project Tempest as an allegory of colonial encounter, romance between a hero and a heroine. So it is the element or the presence of this original inhabitants which made the story completely different. So we will stick to this point in the definition, in which colonialism is projected as forming a community. So I would say that forming a community, as I said earlier, it was not something like a smooth process. It will certainly include unforming or reforming the communities which was already there, which was already existing there. And it will certainly include a wide range of practices, like unforming the community or reforming the communities will necessarily include something like trade settlement, plunder will be there, would have happened there. There will be warfare, even genocide and enslavement. As I said earlier, it's all a smooth process. So such practices generated and were shaped by a varieties of writings, like public and private records are there, letters are there, trade documents are there, government papers, even fiction and scientific literature. And these practices and writings are what contemporary studies of colonialism and post-colonialism are trying to make sense of. So they are analyzing all these varieties of writings and trying to make out a picture of what is colonialism and post-colonialism. So I am trying to give out the point that colonialism can be definitely defined as the conquest and control of other people's lands and goods. But you must understand that colonialism in the sense did not begin with the expansion of various European powers into Asia, Africa, or the Americas from the 16th century onwards. It has been a recurrent and widespread feature of human history. So you take this even in second century, you had this Roman Empire stretching its colonies from Armenia to Atlantic, and Mongols conquered the Middle East as well as China. And you know about Aztec Empire stretched their uh, colonies into the valleys of Mexico. And there is this Inca Empire, which was the largest pre-industrial state in the Americas. In southern India came under the control of the Vijayanagara Empire. So I'm trying to say that it is not a new phenomenon which happened with Europeans. So you cannot project them as the inventors or the people, the villains behind this process. Even when you take European colonialism, it is actually, even that is not a new. Europeans had earlier histories of contacts too. Like you had studied that in history of English literature about the Crusades, and you should understand that these legendary exploits of Mongol rulers or this fabled wealth of Mughals were real and actually imagined, fueled these European journeys to different parts of the world. And these European travelers and these European travels actually ushered in new and different kinds of colonial practices which altered the whole globe in a way that previous colonialism did not. So ultimately you must understand that modern European colonialism has as a kind of definite different, it is definitely different from the earlier colonialisms happened in human history. That is why we are focusing on modern European colonialism as such. And when you talk about colonialism, you start from 16th centuries. That means it is definitely different from the earlier colonialisms happened, which as I said earlier, which happened from second century onwards. So where can we understand these differences? Was it that Europeans established empires far away from their, or is it like they were more ruthless or more violent, or were they better organized or a superior race? All of these explanations have in fact been offered effects of European colonialisms. Marxist thinking on this same subject locates a crucial distinction between the two, whereas you should listen, earlier colonialisms were pre-capitalist. Modern colonialism was established alongside capitalism in Western Europe, and modern colonialism did more than extract tribute, goods and wealth from the countries that it conquered. So earlier colonialism was just an extraction. Earlier colonialism just meant that they moved to this different place and their only motive was to extract tribute, goods and wealth from the countries they conquered. But in the case of modern European colonialism, it actually restructured the economies of the latter. that is the colonized country, and drawing them into a complex relationship with, and so that there was a flow of human and natural resources between colonies. Flow worked in both directions. It is important, it worked in both directions, like there was a movement of slaves and indentured labor as well as raw materials to manufacture goods in metropolis or in other locations for metropolitan consumption. But the colonies also provided captive markets for European goods. Thus, slaves actually moved from Africa to the Americas, and in the West Indian plantations, these people worked as slaves and they produced sugar for consumption in Europe. And there is this movement of raw cotton. So you must have learned it in the history of India that the raw cotton was moved from India to be manufactured into the cloth in England and then sold back to India, whose own cloth production suffered as a result. So the point is in which, so as I said earlier, there was a flow in both directions. The human beings and materials traveled, the profit always to another country. So these flows of profits and people involved settlement and plantations as in the Americas, trade as in India, and enormous global shift of population. So there was this constant movement of populations from one place to another, and both the colonized and colonizers moved, not the colonized alone. The former, not only the colonized, moved not only as slaves but also as indentured laborers, as domestic servants, travelers, traders, and colonial masters moved as they came to India as administrators, soldiers, settlers, and even more like missionaries, teachers, and scientists. So the essential point here is that although European colonialism involved a variety of techniques and patterns of domination, penetrating deep into some societies and involving and all of them actually produced some kind of economic imbalance that was necessary for the growth of European capitalism. And interesting to say that colonialism was actually the midwife that assisted at the birth of European capitalism, or we should say that without colonialism, the transition to capitalism could not have taken place in Europe.